marriage itself was orchestrated in the heavens above. Born from an affluent family, she sprouted from greatness. She was known for her generosity, spirituality, kindness, and devotion. Unmatched, which is why it was important that she be married to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Although she was short in stature, the Prophet himself said amongst the mother of the believers she would meet him first who had the longest arms, which spoke volumes in regards to her generosity. Her name was Zaynab bint Jahsh. Join host Lailanasheeba on another exciting installment in the Heroines of Islam series, every Monday and Wednesday 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, right here on Sunnahfollowers.
Ina alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Alhamdulillah, welcome to our series on the Heroines of Islam. The Heroines of Islam, and this is the series whereas I, lailanasheeba, am taking you on a journey through history, a journey through the beginning of Islam, a journey through the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he arose as a prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the medieval dark ages. The medieval dark ages. That's when the world changed. This is after Christianity had abandoned the people. Judaism had long left them. The people were living in the darkest times here on earth, where only the strong survived and the strong usurped from others. There was no good manners. There was no good character, no good anything. You know, it was all about wielding a sword, wielding a bow, knowing how to protect yourself. If you couldn't protect yourself, you had nothing that you could hold on to. This was an era in which women were looked upon as just nothing but property. Women had no rights. Women had no major roles in anything. A woman was used for two sources, for two things: to bear children and as for sex, and that's it. As the battles and wars were fought, the women were part of the spoils of the war, and not just the women, but the children too. And also, this was an era of slavery where people, the weak, were taken and oppressed and suppressed and put into slavery. So these were some horrific times in the history of man that Allah chose to bring about a change. And that change began with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And each one of his wives that he married, you know, they were all married for different reasons. They all were special in their own unique ways. And they all were great examples to us, even today, as to how to maintain a good relationship with a spouse. We covered the story of Khadijah, radiallahu anha, his first wife. That's as close to perfection as anyone is ever going to get in a marriage, in a relationship. And then we did the story of Sauda, the story of sacrifice, how this woman, because of her love for Allah, her love for him, she sacrificed everything, her husband, her family, her money, and everything, and even her position and her right as a wife, just to be amongst the women of paradise. Okay. And then we did the story of Aisha radiallahu anha, a story of the push and pull, how love can have many entanglements. There's many entanglements that come with love. and how when it comes to love, you have to make sacrifices. Sometimes as a woman, we have to sacrifice the things we like the most, such as our material desires, because we're representing our husband. And then then we had the story of Hafsa, radiallahu anha, another wife of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that taught us that marriage entails, sacrifice and control, to give up your love for this world because of who you're married to. You are an extension of him. And that also entails controlling your anger, controlling your temper, to not embarrass him, to not make him, your husband, look bad. We learned what happens with that from Hafsa. And then we learned about the next wife of his, the first Zaynab. Even though he was married to her for just 2 months, her marriage brought about unity. Her marriage brought about unity. A whole tribe of people converted as a result of that union, even though that union didn't last but less than 2 months. But that's okay. Whenever we bear hardships with patience, Allah sends better. And that's what Allah did after her death with Salama, radiallahu anha. Salama, the lioness of Allah. She was also the cousin, the first cousin of the sword of Allah. She was the first cousin of Khalid bin Walid. And like her first cousin, she was trained in warfare. She was very strategic when it came to the art and strategy of war. And also she could wield a sword. She was just as great a warrior as her first cousin. And because of her union to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what her first cousin, who was like a brother to her, saw, that's what made him convert to Islam. Right after the Prophet married Salama, he gained another great friend, a great leader, because Khalid converted to Islam right after her marriage. Because like he said, if my sister, because he viewed her as a sister, if she says he's a good man and he's good enough that she would marry him, then I'm converting too, and I accept him too. So we learned a lot with Salama, that a woman can issue fatwa, that a woman can hold a position of power. She was the Prophet Muhammad's war counselor. Okay. She was also the woman whose home he could seek comfort in, because he made dua for her. We learned from her marriage the power of dua. How you brothers need to make dua for your wives instead of hating your wives. If you see something that you dislike in your wife, make dua asking Allah to take it away. Well, the Prophet made dua for Salama even before he married her, that Allah remove her heart of any jealousy and any female drama. So she was his comfort. He married her, and her home was the place he could lay his head in peace and comfort, while the other wives kept the drama going, because no one dared approach her. No one dared upset her, because she was the lioness of Allah, and she could wield that sword. Even Aisha never crossed Salama. And then we did the story that we're on right now, the story of Zaynab, radiallahu anha. Her story, subhanallah. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Salama, from their union came comfort, a place of comfort and retreat, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can get a break from all the drama he was dealing with in life, and also an intelligent, mature woman. Aisha was intelligent, but she was a kid. An intelligent, mature woman who could read him and strategize with him. That's what he had in Salama. And so, alhamdulillah, that's when the revelations started coming to him more at her house instead of Aisha's, radiallahu anha. But when he married Zaynab, this became a pivotal moment too, because Zaynab was someone who was, number one, his first cousin. He always admired her from a distance. And her family always wanted their daughter Zaynab to marry him. They had hoped to unite them in marriage. Zaynab was extremely beautiful, just like her cousin. Exactly. They say she looked just like the Prophet. They were first cousins. Her mother was his father's sister. Okay. Plus, she was very regal, very noble. She came from a high class family, a rich, wealthy family. She was of the Abdul Muttalib tribe. Okay. So he had his eye on her, but he never got around to asking her for marriage because he got tied up with other things, his mission, and also the other wives he were marrying. He married them for different reasons. So Zaynab remained unmarried, a virgin, until she was 35 years old. So her story is a story of patience. She had her eye on one man her entire life, and that man was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, her cousin. But, radiallahu anha, but when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally approached her family for marriage, it wasn't for himself. This is a story of sacrifice. Even though the Prophet had always wanted to marry her, just hadn't gotten around to it, something else happened. He was busy trying to unite the Arabic tribes together because the Arabs were a nomadic warrior race of people. They had a lot of tribal differences, tribal hatred, tribal animosity. So he was trying to teach them, we got to stop this, put these year-old feuds to the side. We have to realize that it's all about establishing God consciousness. It's all about el-wala, wal-bara, allegiance. And he had to tell them, you guys have declared la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. That means we are declaring allegiance to Allah. You're declaring allegiance to me as your prophet and allegiance to each other. Wala wal-bara. So to prove that these past differences need to be set aside, and that we need to stand in solidarity as one. Instead of sympathizing, feeling sorry for yourself, we need to start empathizing for your brothers and sisters in Islam. And to demonstrate this, the idea hit him. Let me give my adopted son in marriage to the most beautiful, wealthy woman here, who's my first cousin, who he really wanted to marry for himself, but he threw it aside. Let me bring these two, my adopted son, who's an ex-slave, and unite him in marriage to this beautiful, noble, wealthy woman of high status. So that's the proposal he brought to her family, and her family were shocked. They told him, they said, oh, Muhammad, you know, we plan to marry her to you. She's 35 years old and she's waited all this time to be wedded to you. We can never marry our beautiful, noble daughter to an ex-slave. So her family refused. But then Allah, this is the first verse sent down about this relationship. That's when Allah sent down the verse from the Quran saying, if you truly believe in him, you would not deny what your prophet says. Obey your prophet and you obey me. You will never be a believer until you obey the messenger. And when Allah sent that verse down, that's when Zaynab went to her parents. She said, I don't want to marry this man, but Allah commands us to obey Allah. Allah commands us to then obey his messenger. She said, so I will agree to marry this man because it's what Allah wants and it's what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wants. So that's how Zaynab and Zayd were united in marriage. She was 35 years old. That was a marriage of misery. They hated each other. She said Zayd is too ugly, unattractive. Plus, he's too low for her. He looked at Zaynab as being too proud, too arrogant, too pompous, too conceited. So they clashed. But the one thing about this marriage, Zaynab would go and complain about him. She'd say, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, he's a good man. Zayd is a good Muslim. He loves you. He loves Allah. He fulfills all of the duties, but I just can't stand him." And then Zayd would go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and say, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, Zaynab's a good believing woman. She loves Allah. She obeys Allah. She loves to worship Allah. I just can't stand her." And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would tell them both, stick it out. He would tell them both, you too are setting a precedent here. You too are setting a precedent for all of this nation that will come after you. That social status and stuff doesn't matter. A beautiful woman and a regular man can still be together. So the Prophet encouraged them to try to make it work. And they tried. They really did. But sometimes, no matter how hard we try, if there's no commonality, and this marriage had no commonality, it's just not going to work. So after less than a year, they weren't even married a year. After less than a year, Zayd couldn't take it. So he finally told Zaynab, "I divorce you. I just can't take it." And when he divorced her, it was when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was at home with his wife Salama sleeping. And Allah sent a revelation to him in a dream, letting him know, your Zayd has divorced Zaynab. I am marrying her to you. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam woke up from that dream, he was shocked. He said, Allah has married me to Zaynab, but, oh my God, what will the people think? What will the people say? They will think, oh, the Prophet just gave Zayd a divorce just because he let him divorce because he wanted her. So the Prophet didn't share that knowledge with anybody yet. Allah told him, wait until after her waiting period, and then she is married to you. So during her waiting period, the Prophet didn't talk about it to anybody. But then right after her waiting period for divorce was over, Allah sent another revelation to the Prophet telling him, go and announce it. You seem to fear the people and what they'll say when all you need to fear is me. You are married to Zaynab. And don't worry about Zayd. He said, because your adopted son is not your son. And that's when Allah sent down this is the second pivotal part. Allah sent down the verses of the Quran abolishing adoption. Allah said adoption is bad, adoption is dirty, it destroys inheritance, it destroys the bloodline. From this day on, there will be no more adoptions. So don't fear what the people say. Do what I say. And that's when the prophet woke up from that revelation. And he called the people together. And he told them, I am hereby married. He called Zayd and the people together and said, I have been married to Zaynab by Allah. He said, Zaynab is now my wife. No witnesses needed, no guardian needed, no dowry. We have been married together by Allah. And there's two different hadiths. Some of the hadiths say that the prophet sent a slave girl named Selma to tell Zaynab that she was now hereby married to the prophet. And then there's other hadiths that say that he sent Zayd to tell her. The most authentic one that I think is he sent the slave girl Selma, because when Zaynab heard the news that Allah had married her to the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was ecstatic, because that's the only man she'd been saving herself for. So she took all her jewelry off, all her bangles and earrings. Women wore jewelry, her nose ring. She took all her jewelry off and gave it to the slave girl as a gift. That's how happy she was. And also she swore to fast, because Zaynab loved Allah. She loved to worship Allah. She swore an oath that she would fast for 2 whole months to show Allah how thankful she was that she was finally able to marry the man who she saved herself for. And for those of you who don't know, Zaynab could have been his virgin wife too, like Aisha. But see how Allah works? We talked about how Aisha was so jealous when the prophet married Salama. Before he married Salama, Aisha used to boast and brag about how all the revelations came when he was with her and no other wife. So to teach Aisha a lesson, after he married Salama, Allah sent the revelations when he was with her. Aisha learned from that. And that's when she asked Allah, oh Allah, let me be the only virgin he ever married in. Since I can't boast and brag about being the only wife whose home the revelations come to, let me at least be the only virgin. So Allah answered the supplication of Aisha. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been the only virgin. Zaynab would have been the virgin too. And Zaynab was 36 years old. This is how she held herself out for him. She was 36 years old when the prophet married her. 35 when she married Zayd. So that could have been something. That could have been even worse competition for Aisha, radiallahu anha. But Allah gave Aisha that. So we talked about how after Allah abolished adoption, the people began to slander the prophet anyway. The hypocrites. The hypocrite said, oh, he withheld this verse. Why didn't he tell us when this verse was first sent down? He's trying to change the Quran and trying to make up stuff to suit him, which is what the prophet knew they would say. But Allah came to the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's defense. Allah sent down a verse saying, your adopted sons are not your sons. He said, Muhammad doesn't have a son. All his sons died. Okay? I married him to her. So Allah vindicated the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And after Allah sent that third verse down, that's when the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Zaynab had their walima, or their wedding feast. And we talked about how Aisha said, out of all the wives, there was never a wedding feast more elaborate than the feast the prophet had with Zaynab. Well, for one thing, Zaynab's family was the Abdul Muttalib's tribe. They were wealthy. So this was the only marriage. This was the only marriage whose wedding feast the prophet had meat. The other wives may have had dates and milk to serve. This one they had meat and everything. And also we talked about how another pivotal moment occurred during the wedding feast. Allah sent a miracle, a miracle. We talked about how Anas's mother prepared a dish that was only large enough to feed 4 people. But Allah caused that little dish to feed over 300 people. 300 people attended the wedding feast of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Zaynab, and they all ate from that dish of food. They had meat and everything else. So that's where we stopped off the last time we met. So now Zaynab, radiyallahu anha, finally is with the man of her choice. She sacrificed her likes. Remember, we talked about you will never, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you will never be a believer, none of you, until you learn to love for the sake of Allah. Loving for the sake of Allah means loving everything Allah loves, and only hate what Allah hates. Zaynab is an example of al-wala, wal-bara, allegiance, because she put her personal likes, her personal dislikes aside and married a man who she had no desire to be with, and gave up the man of her dream for that. So what was her reward? Remember, anytime we sacrifice for Allah, Allah always rewards her. So because she made that sacrifice for him, Allah gave her what she always wanted, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen and let's take a look to see how this marriage went. Is this it? Is this, wait a minute, this ain't my PowerPoint. Hold on. Oh, here it is. This is the PowerPoint. Inshallah, you guys be able to see. Oh, I'm not screen sharing. Okay, let me screen share. Okay, here we go. So this is the conclusion, concluding session. We're going to speak about Zaynab as a wife and all the pivotal moments in history that happened as a result of this union. Okay. Another pivotal moment. The wedding feast of Zaynab and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took place in the 5th year after the Hijrah. Remember, and after this, after her wedding feast, right after this wedding feast occurred, this is when Allah sent down the 53rd verse of Surah Azab. Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning, O you who believe, do not enter the prophet's houses until you are told to for a meal. And then if you do come to eat, leave early. Okay, and don't come early. But when you are invited, come. And after you have eaten your meal, leave without sitting around talking, because this type of behavior annoys the prophet, but he's too ashamed or too shy to tell you to leave. But I, Allah, I am not shy and not ashamed to tell you the truth. And when you ask his wives for anything, ask them from behind a screen or a curtain, because that's greater for you. Nor is it right for you to annoy the Prophet Muhammad, nor can you marry his wives after he dies. So here, this powerful verse of the Quran was revealed right then when the Prophet had his feast. It was the custom, but remember, these were the dark ages. People didn't have manners. People didn't have good character. People didn't have good morality. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, I was sent to teach you good character, teach you good manners, teach you good morality. And by teaching you these things, I'm teaching you Islam, which is submission to Allah. Before Allah sent these verses down, okay, the Arabs used to be invited to events. They would come early and they would sit there talking and chit-chatting while you cook the food. And then after the event, they wouldn't leave. They still sit there talking and chit-chatting. They would also enter your house without knocking. They would just barge in. So on this wedding night, you know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had this big feast. As Aisha said, this was the biggest feast the Prophet ever had for a walima. People were sitting there, a group of men and women were sitting and talking. The Prophet wanted to be alone with Zaynab. They were finally married. He wanted to take his beautiful wife and consummate his marriage. Okay? But he had to sit there. And she had to sit there, you know, because these people wouldn't leave. So that's why Allah sent these verses down saying, you overstayed your visit. Get up and leave. The Prophet may be too shy to tell you, but I ain't. Get out. It's not good manners. Okay, so this is a pivotal verse that was sent down teaching the Arabs, come when you're invited and leave quickly. Because a man wants to be with his wife. This is their wedding night. They waited a long time to be married. Subhanallah. Okay. And also, right after that, a few days later, Allah wasn't done. Allah also sent down the 27th and 28th verses of Surah Nur, where he says, O you who believe, do not enter houses other than your own until you have asked permission and greeted the people in there. This is better for you so that you don't see something that you shouldn't see. And if you find that no one is home, then don't enter. If you are told to leave, then leave. So Allah sent down all these pivotal verses telling us how to respect a man and his wife, how to respect the home of a man when he's married. All of this occurred when and after he married Zaynab, radiallahu anha. So now the Arabs were learning good manners, to respect a man's home, respect the man and his wife's family. You know, don't enter when you want. These are also known as the verses. These are also known as the verses of hijab, guys. So this is when the verses of hijab came down. The verses of hijab were revealed after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam married Zaynab. And also another incident had happened during this time. You know, one of the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going to answer the call of nature at night. And Umar recognized who she was. And Umar was afraid that what if an enemy, remember we had hypocrites amongst us. We got the Quraysh spying on us. We got enemy tribes. What if somebody saw her and abducted her and took her as a hostage? And Umar told the Prophet, I saw one of your wives leaving out the house in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. He said, what if somebody had grabbed her and took her as a hostage to ransom or to kill her, to hurt you? He said, I wished Allah would send down some verses so that the women would have to cover themselves so nobody can see who they are at night. Allah agreed with Umar. And that's when Allah sent down these verses of hijab. Listen to what happened. The Umar said, O Prophet of Allah, many people, good and bad, come to visit you. How do you know if they're not coming to take your wives? So order your wives to cover themselves. So nobody can tell which one is your wife and which is a slave. Also, in another hadith, Umar said to one of the wives, if what I say about you is accepted, my eyes will never see you again. He was telling her how he wished that she would cover up when she leaves, the home, so nobody could tell she was one of his wives. And that's when Allah sent down these verses of the Quran saying that no man can visit with a woman or enter the house of the prophet or any other man's house unless he's a mahram. And if you want to talk to the wives of the prophet, address them from behind a curtain. And when Allah sent these verses down, that's when the wives of the prophet not only started covering themselves when they left the home, but also they hung up curtains at their door. And as I told you guys, how would the women cover their faces? They did not wear burqas. That's not part of Arabic dress. The women would go out the house, as Aisha said, at nighttime, and they would usually go in a group. And when the group of women left, they would do this. All the women would take their scarf and do this, so that and they were in a group, so that you didn't know who was who. You didn't know who was who. So if a man wanted to abduct some of the prophet's wives, you don't know who. And then they take it down. This is what they did. Took it down. This is what they did. Took it down. So when they would go out the house as a protection, they would go out in a group, and all the women would do this as they passed by men. And after they passed the men, take it down. Y'all see that? You got to learn these hadiths. Aisha explains this. Atiyah explains this. Even Zaynab explains this. So after those verses came down, the prophet's wives never allowed any men to come in their house. If you wanted to know something, they would stand outside the curtain, okay, and talk from the curtain. And whenever a Muslim woman left her home, that's when Allah also sent down the verses saying, draw your veils over your bosom. Oh, you women who believe, draw your veils over your bosom, cover your chest, dressed in overgarments. He uses the word jilbab in the Quran. Jilbab means overgarment. Wear an overgarment so no one can recognize your body or see any skin. And make sure that your khimar, your covering, covers your chest. Okay? And then Allah doesn't mention for a woman to cover her face. That's nowhere in the Quran. But as Aisha explained, we women, as wives of the prophet, because Umar had a good point, all of the women are dressed the same. All Muslim women don't show their bodies. We don't look like the Kafir women. We all have on abayas. We all have our hair covered. There's no hair hanging out. Layla, I'm going to do her story for y'all. Layla, she's connected with Khalid bin Walid. She became one of his wives. Layla was one of the most beautiful women of her time. Her hair was so long, it came to the ground, and she had beautiful legs. Before she became Muslim, that's how the Arabic women dressed. They didn't cover up like this with abayas. They wanted to show some leg, they show it. And they would let their hair hang down. Okay? Well, when Allah sent down these verses of hijab, he said, oh, you women who believe, when you leave your homes, wear a jilbab, which is an outer garment. The outer garment will cover the skin. It will also cover and hide your shape. Also cover your hair. So no one can, and all you women look the same. We're all in solidarity. We all look the same. Put all of us in a group. We all got abayas on. We all have our hairs on, our hair covered with khimar like I have on. We look the same. Maybe different colors. That's fine. And if we all choose to walk past a group of men and do this, You don't know who's Layla. You don't know who's Sabrine. You don't know who Amina Fresno is. You don't know which one of us is Ifti. That's protection against our enemies. That's what Umar was talking about. So Allah has the hikmah. Allah gave Umar what he wanted, but Allah didn't say cover your face. As Aisha said, the only thing that we can show is our face and hands. But since they were at war times, and they were the wives of the prophet, she said sometimes, not always, sometimes in a group, we'd have all the women do this as a protection. And then we do this. Y'all got it? You will never understand the Quran until you learn the Sunnah, the Hadiths. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the Hadiths are the explanation of the Quran. The Hadith is the history. For every verse that Allah sent down in that Quran, something happened. You got to know what happened. You got to learn the Hadiths, people. The Hadiths have become abandoned. They become forgotten. They become replaced with fatwa. And that's why we have a high apostasy rate of women. A lot of women convert to Islam and they leave thinking that we can't wear colors. We got to cover our face. We don't have to. We can wear colors. You can wear anything you want to as long as your skin and your shape is covered except for this. But if you're a person, if we in war times, you best believe we going out in a group to answer the call of nature and we doing this. Especially if I'm married to the Mahdi. Mahdi here, oh, his wife's kids and all the other, we all going out together. You don't know which one of us you're going to kidnap and try to decapitate. Hello, decapitate. Okay, common sense. So these pivotal verses of the Quran on a husband and his wife, their home, the sanctity of it, the mannerisms, all of that was sent down when he married Zaynab, radiallahu anha. Okay, and after Zaynab married the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a lot of drama occurred. Number one, she was the Prophet's first cousin. Number two, she was married by Allah. So this caused his other wives, Aisha, Hafsa, they became extremely jealous. Salama didn't care. Remember, guys, Salama, she always distanced herself from the drama of the other wives because of the supplication the Prophet made for her. Salama stayed in her house, raising her children, strategizing with the Prophet on how to kick some butt, sparring with her cousin, Khalid bin Walid. Okay, she didn't get involved in that female stuff. But the other wives, at this time, it was just Aisha and Hafsa. They were extremely jealous of Zaynab because of these three reasons. And Zaynab approached the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you'll find this in Bukhari. She said, "O Prophet of Allah, there are three privileges that I have that your other wives do not have, and they envy me as a result." She said, number one, your grandfather is my grandfather. That's Abdul Muttalib. Number two, Allah ordered you to marry me. And number three, the go-between was Jibreel. We didn't need no witnesses or none of that. She said, so because of this, they are jealous of me. And even Aisha expressed in numerous hadiths that these were the three reasons why she envied Zaynab. Also, the fact that Zaynab was extremely beautiful. They say, some people say she was more beautiful than Salama. Other people say Salama was, but the bottom line, the three most beautiful wives were Aisha, Zaynab, and Salama. Zaynab, they say, was drop dead gorgeous. Okay? How? And I believe it because she was the prophet's first cousin. He was handsome. She had to be fine. Okay? So, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have to deal with a lot of drama because of this. These women used to actually argue and sometimes hit each other. They would get violent sometimes. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would sometimes sit there and listen to them argue and see them compete. And sometimes he would laugh at them. Because remember, Aisha was like in her teens, 13, 14, trying to deal with these older women who were in their 20s. And, Zaynab was 36 years old. So sometimes the prophet would laugh at them because Aisha had a flippant tongue. Zaynab had a wicked tongue too. And Hafsa had a temper. Hafsa would get mad and punch something. When the prophet saw it getting too rough, sometimes he would leave. He would get up and leave so they could figure it out on their own. So this is a lesson that you brothers learn when you got more than one wife. Let them handle it. He would step in if they went too far. As long as they didn't go too far to hitting each other or cursing each other or using the B word, he would let them do their thing. He wouldn't try to get in there and do that other stuff. He would laugh, but if he saw it getting a little heated that they need to work it out, he'd get up and go to the mosque and leave them. Or he'd go to Salama. That's why they was so jealous of Salama. Salama, he could always go to her house for comfort because no drama. Okay? But to show how righteous these women were, even though these women suffered with jealousy like any other woman does, even though these women were competitive, what made these women better than you, me, and the rest of us? Their faith, their wala, walbara. Even though, like my cousin Mukhtar talked about, the companions were human. They'd have arguments. Abu Bakr and Umar had arguments. But they had allegiance, al-wala, wal-bara, allegiance to each other. That brotherhood was there. That sisterhood was there. They wouldn't go but so far. An example of how righteous and pious Zaynab was this event. When that event happened about the slander, Aisha was her biggest enemy. Aisha was her biggest competition as a wife. This was Zaynab's chance to take Aisha out. Ali had already suggested to the prophet that he divorce Aisha because she was too arrogant to teach her a lesson. So the prophet went to Zaynab, radiallahu anha, and he asked her, he said, you know what they're saying about Aisha. What do you think I should do to show how this woman understood the concept of al-wala wa bara? Zaynab said, O Prophet of Allah, I protect my ears and my eyes from that which I have not seen or heard. And I swear by Allah, all I know about Aisha is good. Aisha and I get into arguments. Aisha and I are competitive. She said, but one thing about Aisha, she loves Allah and she loves you. She would never do what those people have accused her of doing. So that shows the difference. We Muslims today don't have that balance. We don't have that allegiance. We'll look for reasons to take each other down. We'll look for reasons for our husband to get rid of a wife. We'll look for reasons to destroy a dawah that we're jealous of. Well, those companions didn't go that far. They'd argue. They get competitive. But they would never, ever, ever degrade. Remember, what three things are sacred? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whenever you testify to la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, three things are off limits: my life, my reputation, and my property. Zaynab didn't go after Aisha's reputation. That's sacred. She said, no, I don't like her. She said, me and Aisha don't get along. I think she's arrogant. I think she thinks she's all that in a bag of chips. But one thing about Aisha, she loved Allah. She loved you. And she would never lower herself to what these people have accused her of. Okay? The word got back to Aisha of what Zaynab said. And when Aisha heard what she said, she cried. And she said, Zaynab is a woman who is my rival, but because of her fear of Allah and her love for him, Allah saved her and protected her from participating in any slander. So even Aisha learned to respect Zaynab after that. Her and Zaynab still never got along, but there was a respect. Aisha held a grudge against Ali. She even had one against Fatima, but she developed a high respect for Zaynab, who was her biggest rival, because Zaynab spoke nothing but good of her. And also it showed her faith. Okay? So we have to understand as Muslims what we learn from this. One of the greatest reasons for misunderstandings and arguments amongst the family is because of assumptions. A lot of us overthink, myself included. I suffer with overthinking. Sometimes when we overthink, we make assumptions without knowing if they're true or not. Allah commands us to investigate any news. And that's what came down from this slander stuff. Allah sent down the verses telling us to investigate any bad information that we hear about a person before we believe it. Allah says in the interpretation, the meaning, O you who believe, if an evil person comes to you with any news, make sure that it's the truth, or you may harm some people and afterwards, feel bad about it. So this is another verse that came down after the marriage to Zaynab. Zaynab proved how righteous a woman she was. And I'm going to tell you why Allah protected her. Remember, we talked yesterday in one of my hadith classes about how Allah, after he breathed the soul, had the soul of Adam breathed in his body, Allah ran his hands across his back and said, these souls that I have created are the descendants of you. The ones on this side will be paradise. The ones on this side will be hell. Allah already knew what each soul would do. Allah didn't make the choice. You make your own choices because Allah gave us that free will. It's just that he knew what our choices would be. We talked about how Allah wants us to call upon him, to remember him in good times, remember him in bad times, to remember what your purpose is. Look at Zaynab, radiyallahu anha. The love of her life was always the Prophet Muhammad. 35 years old was old back in those days. She saved herself, held out from marrying any man, and she was beautiful. She was rich. She had her eye, and her family had their eye on him. But she gave that up for the sake of Allah. When Allah said, do what your prophet says do, she did it. Married a man that she had no desire to be with. Okay? Sacrifice. And during her marriage to the prophet, she spent, you don't want to know how she spent most of her time? She spent most of her time praying and giving in charity. Zaynab was a rich woman, but was very charitable. And she loved to pray. In fact, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the mosque one day and he saw a rope hanging up. He said, "Who is this rope for?" And one of the companions said, "That rope belongs to your wife Zaynab. She likes to come here on the nights that you are not with her." How does she spend her time? The nights that the Prophet was with his other wives, she would go to the mosque and she would stand up all night praying to Allah. She would hold on to that rope to keep herself from falling down. That's how much she loved Allah. She spent the nights when the Prophet was away from her praying during the night. And also being rich. Listen to what Aisha said. Aisha said she always told the truth. She took care of her family. She used to give away any money and gold she'd have to her family, her relatives, and the needy. And everyone knew about her and that rope. Everybody knew that she'd go at night when the Prophet was with his other wives, how she spent her nights. Loneliness is something that none of us like to deal with. A lot of us women complain because our husbands ain't here. Zaynab waited 36 years to be with him. She didn't like the fact that he was with her other wives. She was jealous. But rather than allow her jealousy to cause her to sit up at night and imagine what he doing with the other wives. Do he love her more than me? Is he giving her more time than me? What would she do? She spent the whole night praying to Allah, remembering Allah. That's what I tell you, sisters. You know, you can't handle your life problems. You're overwhelmed with life. You're nothing like these female companions were. How do we women learn to master our emotions? The only way we can master our emotions is through remembrance of Allah. That's why I'm on here. Why does lailanasheeba spend all her time doing lectures on the internet? People ask me all the time, how many classes did you give? 3. You give 3 classes a day? Yeah. What you doing now? Making videos. What you doing now? PowerPoint. This is the way I keep myself busy, remembering Allah. I can't do like Zaynab and pray all night long because I got bad knees. But teaching this religion, this is an action of worship. I can sit here and do that. Making videos, doing my PowerPoint, those are all actions of worship, remembering Allah. As I put these hadiths together, as I put these PowerPoints together, I'm reminding myself of what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'd rather spend all night doing this rather than sit here crying a river because I ain't got no man. I'm lonely. Oh, Allah, make dua for me, everybody. Oh, no. The companions weren't like that. These women learned to master their emotions through prayer, through fasting, through giving and charity. Look what Aisha did. Aisha had to learn how to channel her jealousy. So what did she do? She took in orphans, little girls, young girls. And on the nights that the Prophet was not with her, she would teach Quran to those young girls, orphan girls. Okay? Salama didn't have to worry about that stuff. She was drama free. All she cared about is bring me my sword. This is what we're going to do to the Quraysh today. Okay? Zaynab was at the mosque praying. Sauda was the foundation. She was the rock of the family. All the children were with her. She was mothering everybody's kids and making leather goods for everyone. We need to be like those female companions, guys. Like I said, empathy. We'll never have al-wala, allegiance with each other, until we stop feeling sorry for ourselves and stop feeling sorry for people. Take that sympathy, shove it out the window, and replace it with empathy. Until we do that, we'll never be balanced. We'll never have allegiance with each other. We'll never be like these companions were. Okay? So that's how Zaynab spent her time. You know, when the prophet wasn't around, she would spend her nights in prayer. The daytime, as the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was taking care of whatever business, she was helping others, taking care of her relatives, you know, giving in charity. And this continued even after the prophet's death. Okay, Zaynab, my cousin Mukhtar was speaking today about how the Caliphate of Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, how Abu Bakr decided when he was the caliph to give everybody a stipend that was equal. But how when Umar did it, Umar felt that some people should get more. And we talked about that here, even with Aisha. Remember when Umar became the caliph, he gave Aisha more money than the other wives because she was the prophet's favorite. But Aisha wasn't the only one. He also gave Zaynab more than he even gave Aisha. Why? Because she was his family. She was the prophet's first cousin. Let's talk about this hadith. Okay? Zaynab, she had an allowance of 12,000 dirhams, which had been allocated just to her, because she was the family of the prophet. She was his cousin. But when she received that money, she would immediately give it away in charity. In fact, when Umar first did this, when Umar became the caliph, he had 12,000 dirhams sent just to her. And when she got it, she didn't want it. She said, "Oh Allah," she made dua. She said, "Oh Allah, do not send me this money next year, because this is a provocation." Let's talk about it a little more. What happened is what Mukhtar said. When Umar became the caliphate, the income in the treasury increased. So he gave the companions who fought the Battle of Badr more than he did companions that came after that. He gave Aisha a little bit more than the other wives because she was the prophet's favorite. But with Zaynab, he gave her more than he even gave Aisha because she was the family of the prophet. And Zaynab was shocked. She said, "Oh Allah, forgive Umar. Are my other sisters and brothers included in this?" And the person that brought the money to her told her, "No, this is just for you. Aisha's not getting this. None of the other wives are." She said, "Subhanallah," and she covered the money up with a cloth. And she told her servant, "Put your hand in and take as much as you can and take it to so-and-so and let them put their hand in and take it to the next person and the next person." And that's what the servant did. So thus, she gave that 12,000 dirhams. She distributed to all her relatives and all the people who didn't have family members. And nothing was left, Harley. When the servant came back, the servant said, "Oh, Zaynab, may Allah forgive you. We don't have much left." She said, "That's okay." So that shows how giving Zaynab was. She felt uncomfortable taking this money. Yeah, I was his wife, but I'm his cousin, but man, don't do this. She gave it all away. And she made dua asking Allah to not let her ever receive that allowance again. When Umar heard what she did, let's talk about it. Umar heard what she did. And when he heard what she did, he came to her house. He stood outside the curtain and he said, "I heard that you gave all the money I sent you away in charity. So I'm giving you 1,000 more dirhams, and I don't want you to give this away. So Umar sent another 1,000 dirhams, but she did the same thing. She took that 1,000 dirhams and gave it out in charity too. Now remember, she made this dua saying, oh Allah, don't let this happen next year. Don't let me get all this money again next year. Right before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, he had told his wives that the first amongst them that would join him will be the one with the longest arm. Everybody thought that was Sauda because Sauda had the longest arm. Also, Sauda was the oldest because Sauda was in her 60s when the Prophet married her. Okay? Right after Umar became the caliph and did this, Zaynab died. She was the first wife to die after the Prophet died. When she died, everybody said, oh my God, the longest arm. Umar gave her all this money because it was the talk. Everybody in Medina was talking about it, how Zaynab gave all that money away. They said that she spent her life giving everything to the poor and her family. And that's when they all said, oh my God, Zaynab, it was the one with the longest arm. Zaynab was the first wife to die after the Prophet. And she died during the caliphate of Umar. So she died before Aisha, died before Sauda, all of them. She was the first to be with her beloved husband. Check it out. Sacrifices. The sacrifices we make. She saved her virginity. She was 35 years old before she married, although she had hundreds of men who she could have married. She couldn't be with the man she wanted to. She gave that up to be with what Allah and him commanded her to do. Look how Allah rewarded her. Even her death was a reward. I'm giving you, you didn't have him first. You had Zayd first, but I'm giving you him now. You the first that'll join him of his wives. SubhanAllah. See the hikmah of Allah. See how Allah pays off. So that next year, Allah answered Zaynab's dua. She died before Umar was able to send her that next allowance. She gave so much to the poor. She took care of the widows. She even had prepared her own shroud before she died. Even though Umar had sent her a shroud, she had her own. So the shroud that Umar sent was given away in charity by her sister Hamna. Listen to what Aisha said. Aisha said when Zaynab died, Aisha said, the one who is worthy of praise. This is a woman who worships so much. She used to tie herself up in the mosque to worship. She took care of the orphans and widows. She has left us. So even though she had been Aisha's biggest competition when the Prophet was alive, after the Prophet had died, just so you guys know, Aisha and Zaynab became very good friends. In fact, all the wives of the Prophet were close after he died because they had el-wala, that allegiance. They were able to bury the hatchet, after his death, and they were sisters, true sisters. Listen to what Aisha said. She said her virtues were so good. She spoke up for me. She said when very few would. She spent her life helping those in need. This woman is worthy of praise. And remember, the prophet said, those who will reach me quickest and first are those with the longest hands. Aisha said the longest hands was Zaynab. No one gave in charity more than she did. And finally, she's united with the prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and don't have to compete with Aisha. See how that works? She was with the prophet and didn't have to compete with Aisha, just her and him. SubhanAllah. And Khadijah and the other Zaynab. Alhamdulillah. SubhanAllah. I just wonder. I just think that's so adorable. Yeah. So, Zaynab died in the 20th year after the migration. How old was Zaynab when she died, guys? 53. You would have thought Sauda had to be about 80. Sauda was in her 80s when she died. Zaynab died at 53. Umar led her funeral prayer and she was buried in the Baqi cemetery. And how many hadiths did Zaynab narrate? She narrated 11 hadiths. 2 of them are in Bukhari and Muslim. So there's many lessons we can learn from the life of Zaynab. Number 1, she's an example to us all in regards to her meticulous worship, her mercy for the poor, her generosity, and her efforts to own her own living. Let me talk about that. Just like Sauda, Zaynab used to work with leather. She would like to make leather coats and leather things, and she would sell them in the marketplace. Remember the Quraysh? They were all Qurayshi. The Quraysh were merchants. The men were merchants and the women. So this shows that women worked, but they worked at home. The women would work from their home like Sauda did. Sauda made toys and gifts for people when they got married out of leather. She was Quraysh. Zaynab worked with leather and made things. Even Salama, remember Salama worked with leather too to make things and sell. These women, they were all from the Quraysh tribe, okay? They were merchants, but they stayed at home. They worked out their homes, making leather goods and selling them. And that's what Zaynab did. She would be at home during the daytime making leather goods and having them sold in the marketplace. At night, she'd be at the mosque praying. And remember, she didn't want to marry Zayd, but because of the persuasion of the prophet and because of that 13th verse of Surah Hujurat, she agreed to the marriage. And that's something that we can learn. We learn from that sometimes we have to make the sacrifices because our life should be as Allah commands it in the Quran and as the prophet commands it in the Sunnah. Also, look at all the verses of the Quran that were sent down in manners and treatment of spouses because of the prophet's marriage to her. Also, we learn adoption is bad and dirty, outlawed. Also, there's nothing wrong with marrying your first cousin, okay? We learned that status is nothing. Status, rich class, poor class means nothing. But it's good to understand the second part of that. Even though social status carries no weight in our determination as to whether or not you should marry someone, it's best to marry someone that comes from the same tracks as you. And that's what you Bantu girls need to understand. If your father tells you that he don't want you to marry this person because they're not the same culture, you listen to your father. Because Zaynab and Zayd were not the same culture, and that marriage was horrific. It was a marriage of misery, unhappiness. Zayd was happy with Baraka, same culture as him, ex-slave like him. And Zaynab was happy with the prophet, same culture as her, same status as her. Okay, so sometimes it's best to stick with your own, because it's hard for two people from different sides of the track to marry up together, to marry up together. Okay, we learned that with her. Also from Zaynab, we learned that women can work as long as the work that she does is not against her nature, or as long as she's in legitimate surroundings. Zaynab worked from home making that leather stuff, but she didn't go to the market to sell it. She would have her slaves. She had people that she could trust taking the stuff to the market to sell it for her. So she's a great example of how working women should be, and how to utilize their income. The income that she made from what she sold, she gave in charity. She used it to take care of her family and her relatives. And after them, she would give to the needy and the poor. So she's a great role model for us women on how to use our money. And also the fact that she defended Aisha. That's a great example of al-wala, allegiance. We have to learn to restrain our emotions, especially when justice is due. Remember, it's our job as Muslims to speak good or remain silent, and to always enjoin what's good. She spoke up for Aisha, and let it be known, Aisha may be other things, but she ain't no daggone adulteress. And again, the fact that she obeyed the law, the fact that she obeyed the prophet and married someone she didn't, that's the biggest lesson of all for us to walk away with. So that's the story of Zaynab, radiallahu anha. Many hadiths about her. And all these things I'm teaching you came from out of Bukhari and Muslim and Muwatta. Bukhari, Muslim, and Muwatta, they're all authentic. You would read the hadiths about her and Aisha's arguments, their fights, and all of that. Okay. The prophet he loved Zaynab. Okay. They had a lot in common. That's why they fought too. Zaynab and the prophet both liked honey. Okay. That's why Hafsa tried to be like Zaynab and do the honey thing, and it backfired. Because Zaynab and the prophet were first cousins. They had the same likes. They enjoyed sweet honey. And the prophet and her would sit down and have honey together every day, you know. But what got him was, even he didn't know that she spent her nights when she was not with him in prayer. And he had to teach her balance. He had to teach her to balance her worship out. And also when she made that oath to swear, to fast for 2 months, the prophet told her, you can't do that either. Balance. She had a true, strong love for Allah. But the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam helped Zaynab to learn how to balance that love. Balance that love for Allah, so she's not too far to the right or left. All right, so we're going to stop right here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Are there any questions about Zaynab? Any questions? Go ahead.
Jazakallah khair, Layla. I truly enjoyed her story. MashaAllah. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. She was something else, subhanAllah, especially that, you know, a lot of people thought that the first Zaynab, but common sense, the first Zaynab died during the prophet's lifetime. So why would he say the first to join me? He said the first to join after me. Yeah. She was something else. She was a tiger. As you guys can see, all the prophet's wives were strong-minded women. He didn't have any weak women. None of his wives were weak, not even Sauda. All his women were strong-minded. They were all women of brilliance. They were all women of beauty too. You know, they were all women that were warriors too. I mean, I didn't know where this misconception that Muslims today have, that Muslim women are supposed to be, you know, this submissive and no rights, and it's ignorance. That just shows their ignorance. They don't know anything about the Prophet's wives and the female companions. You know, what are you fighting for? What feminism? What are you fighting for? We already liberated. We already have rights. The Prophet's wives used to earn income. They made things and sold it and worked. You can work as long as you don't transgress the limits of it. A lot of women today want to be like men. You want to go out and get a job as a police officer. You want to go out and get a job as a construction worker. You wouldn't see the wives of the Prophet doing that type of jump. I mean, come on, everything within its, you know, limitations. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, guys, we're going to stop for here for today. This is the only class, the last class for tonight. Tomorrow is Thursday, and tomorrow we'll have not one of us. Let me put that little ad up. This will be tomorrow's class at 9. Let's see it.
Another Sunnahfollowers exclusive, Not One of Us, written by Sheikh Muhammad S. Adli, broken down and brought to you by host lailanasheeba. Join us every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, right here on Sunnahfollowers.
Okay, that's tomorrow. And also, don't forget the 6 o'clock class, my class on allegiance. Wala wal better. That's at 6. So make sure everybody is ready for those 2 classes tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for joining and participating. Please support this dawah effort. We're always in need of donations to cover our website expenses. Please, please, please donate to support this website. So subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.